Hi there, it's Beauty Junkie. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm getting into foundation techniques using brushes versus sponges and how that can affect the look, the texture of your skin. Foundations can be very finicky depending on the formula. Sometimes brushes might work better, sometimes your hands, and sometimes sponges, or for me, most of the time a sponge works best on my particular skin. So I thought it would be fun to dedicate a video to foundation techniques. So today I'm going to do half my face with brush, half my face with a sponge, and I'm going to be using a full coverage foundation, the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation. I have the shade number 3 Cool. I think this foundation is going to demonstrate more clearly what the differences are and just hopefully you can see with my camera how the foundation looks with different application techniques. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to talk about tools because that's the main point of this video. The sponges that I use are from Real Techniques. I dampen them, squeeze them out, get a tissue to get out excess moisture. I use two, one for the face and one for smaller one for concealer. For brushes, I have a variety of foundation brushes. When I was younger, I had mostly these kinds of foundation brushes, like flat paddle synthetic brushes. Usually they were really long, almost like a paintbrush. I had the worst luck with those, but when I had them, I thought they were better than a finger application. This is the Lisa Eldridge foundation brush. I've had a lot of luck with this with several foundations. I also have a Rare Beauty foundation brush. This is from It Cosmetics, but you can see these are very dense. I have the Fusion Series set from Sonia G. These are natural and synthetic combination of fibers. I've had okay luck with these. I think they do a decent job, but I will show you what these different brushes can do on my face. So let's get into the application. I have put on primer already, both sides of the face. My Victoria Beckham Cell Rejuvenating Primer in Original. I had skincare on underneath, sunscreen and all that. So let's make this side of the face a sponge, this side a brush. So I'm going to shake up this foundation and show you the texture. This is what we are working with. Kind of a medium consistency. It's not super runny. It's not too thick, but it's fairly high coverage. So I'm going to start with the brush side over here. Now I showed you the variety of brushes that I have. So I can show you, some areas with the flat brush, kind of swiping on the foundation, and then I can show you other areas buffing in with this kind of a brush. This is the Lisa Eldridge foundation brush again, and this is the Sonia G Classic base. There's different techniques even with using brushes. You can just dip your brush into the product, put it on, or you can put the product on your face and then kind of move it around. I'm going to, I think what works slightly better for me is if I put the product on my face first rather than dipping in. I just have more control that way, so that is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to use the flat brush first and just blend this in, spread it around. I think what's important to know about, techniques, foundation techniques, they can all look pretty similar at first. You might notice some differences, in how it lays on your skin. But essentially what we want to do is make the foundation look one with the skin, like you're not wearing makeup at all and you're just kind of perfecting what's there, right? Covering up pigmentation, redness, uneven skin tone, dark circles. Some people want to cover up age spots, freckles, moles, anything really, blemishes. Pretty quickly, I'm able to blend this out. Some people really have concerns over pores and pore size, and they want their foundation to really fill everything in and smooth everything out to give an appearance of a smoother, more youthful appearance and surface happening here. So depending on the technique, you can get that in different ways. For me personally, some techniques work better than others in kind of filling out those pores. I would say besides redness, smoothing out the pores is probably my biggest challenge with foundation. I do not dermaplane, so I don't remove any hair from my face. So I have some fuzz on my face. I don't know if it's longer. I think it's on the more thicker side, even though you can't see it really with the camera. At least I don't think you can. But it is there, and I think that does contribute to my foundation issues, to be honest, and getting the foundation to really mesh well on my skin in a really pretty way. I don't want to dermaplane because I'm afraid it's going to break me out if I do that. So I'd rather just stick with what I have on my skin. Now right now, this doesn't look bad. It didn't use a lot of product though. Just using this foundation brush. The nose area could be improved a little bit. I have the most blemishes right now on my forehead, and I'm going to use the other brush for that area. Put some up here. And I'm going to use the classic base and do a buffing motion. You can definitely do like just kind of spread it out like this, or you can make circular motions to kind of really get it into the skin. You just want to be really gentle, not try to exfoliate the skin and kind of kick up any dryness or texture. That's kind of the opposite of what you want to do. But sometimes I find that buffing with a brush, that happens to me, where I do kind of kick up texture and things do, like the foundation gets into the skin, but things don't look smooth. Now that doesn't look bad either, but there are some areas where the foundation just kind of sticks. Usually in this area is problematic, and usually have more bumps and hair going on up here. So it's just not as smooth looking, and like the foundation just kind of sits in the pore. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I'm going to take a smaller fusion brush and try to work on the nose a little bit more, put a little bit more product over here. So actually that doesn't look bad. I think it looks a little bit dry, especially on the forehead and side of the nose right here. It's a little less smooth looking, a little dehydrated looking, but you know, could be just my skin. Maybe brushes just kind of, I don't know, would bring out the dryness, makes sense. But I want to work on the chin a little bit more on this side. The chin has lots of texture for me. I always break out there. I'm going to use the buffing brush. All right, there you have it, a little bit more coverage on the chin. Trying to drag this down my neck a little bit more. It's not the perfect color for me. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the sponge side. Hopefully we can talk through differences I notice when using a sponge. Now, I know that the main difference people notice with a brush versus a sponge is coverage. Usually people get a little bit more coverage. It varies, but they get more coverage when using a brush versus using a sponge. People say that the sponge always shears out the coverage because your sponge has water in it. So you're using less product and kind of taking some of the product off when you bounce. Also, sponges eat up product, and some people will argue, you know, I want that product to go in my skin, not into the, you know, the tool. Well, I mean, your brush is also eating up product, but I think the sponge eats up more. So there's that. But I think it just, I'll show you guys what it looks like on my skin. I just feel like it adds another, the water in here adds like a layer. It does something to the foundation that just makes it look smoother. So I'm going to dip my sponge directly into the product and bounce. I know some people can find bouncing very annoying. It feels like more work, and I can totally see that. So I just dipped in a lot of product, so I'm probably gonna get more coverage on this side, to be honest. I mean, one dip is gonna cover half the face. You do not need a lot of product with this foundation because it's got so much coverage. So I'm getting into all the nooks and crannies. I feel like it's easier to do that with a sponge. It's just more flexible. You can move with the curves of your face a little bit better. Usually I think I can put on my makeup a lot faster with a sponge. It's a larger surface area than a brush. I just usually think I have to work a lot less, but it depends. Some people can bounce and blend for a good 5 minutes straight with their foundation until they feel satisfied with, you know, the look on the skin. I don't know if it's because of the peach fuzz on my face, but it just, this technique gives an overall uniform, smoother look, especially in my big pore areas right here and on the nose. Now, if it's a foundation that I use a sponge and I still have trouble in these areas, I usually don't like the foundation. I would say that, oh, this one doesn't really work for me as well. So my go-to is always sponge application with foundation. Now you can go to another part of the sponge. If you feel you have a little bit too much coverage, take another part of the sponge that's still damp and kind of go over those areas to kind of diffuse the product, maybe lift some off a little bit. I think, you know, taking away of the product really helps. So the subtlety with both sides here, sponge side, this area just looks glowier, smoother. The pores, to me, lay a little bit flatter. Pores look a little bit more apparent. Maybe the hairs are not laying flat, they're standing up a little bit. So I guess the skin texture is just a little bit more apparent on this side. You guys probably think I'm nuts because the difference isn't huge, but it's different enough for me to notice. So I always prefer the sponge side over the brush technique. Sometimes I can get, I mean, this looks fine. I can definitely go all day with the brush side. You know, not too much of an issue, but I do think I like to start out my day as best as possible. And, you know, if I'm going all day at work, 8 hours at least, I want to start out the best as possible because I know as the day goes on, my makeup starts to wear off. I get the oil breakthrough. If it's hot, that affects things. So I want my day to start off as smooth as possible. And if I'm already starting a little bit more textured, it's only going to go downhill from there. So I do like to think about that when I'm putting on my makeup. So another problem area to look for is my area around here. As I said, more hair around the eyebrows, and it's a spot where I usually see foundation sticking into the pores. So to me, this side, it looks okay. This side, you can see the little foundation pits, the little circles of foundation that just stay in my pores. Whereas this side, you don't see that as obviously. So I don't know, I think it's the damp sponge that kind of just makes the foundation kind of work in to the canvas. Otherwise, I'm going to show you a couple of close-up shots of my face on both sides. You guys can maybe tell the difference that I'm talking about. I know most of you will think I'm a little bit crazy, but you know, smoothness is important to me. I don't want to look older. I want to look younger when I put on makeup. I just noticed with me for years before I discovered sponges, my foundation looked pretty terrible to the point that I would always use tinted moisturizers because I just couldn't get foundations to look good on my skin. Like after a couple hours, it just looked terrible. It looked like cake face. So to avoid that, I would just wear tinted moisturizers because there wasn't a lot of pigment. They're really more forgiving in terms of like technique. You can just slap them on and it's fine. Foundation, that's not really the case. If you don't really blend it in properly, the hours go on, it starts to really make your face look funny, like noticeably funny. I'm thinking back to the days in middle school where I tried to apply foundation and I didn't know what I was doing and I got major cake face and people noticed it. And they even told me, like, don't even wear makeup at all. Like, those are the things you don't forget. So for many years, I just stayed, like in college, I just steered clear of foundations until I discovered sponges, and it just literally changed the makeup game for me 100%. Now, I didn't even have the foundations brushes that I have today. They were much worse. So there's a lot, brushes have improved, I think, a lot. The availability of brushes have improved a lot. I think most people, I don't know, apply the foundation with their fingers. You know, the regular makeup wear at home, you just put it on with your fingers and hope for the best. I know my mom wasn't using brushes. Now she is, but I don't know. For me, I just think this technique is a huge game changer. If you have trouble with foundations, like staying looking nice all day and you feel like, you know, things just could look better, because if you have makeup that makes your skin look worse than it actually is, it ages you, it makes you feel like you shouldn't be wearing makeup at all. It can be really discouraging. So I just want to point out the differences between these techniques. Now, if I were to be really ambitious, I would show you what foundation looks like with just fingers. I think for like an hour, it looks fine with most foundations. Some absolutely not. But after an hour, you'll start to notice some major differences between using like actual tools to apply your foundation. I know that when I use fingers with like something very full coverage, things start to slip and slide around because the foundation isn't attached as well to the skin. It's just kind of sitting on the surface. And once the oils break through, maybe you have a bunch of powder on top, things start to slip and slide around a lot more. So that's why most of the time I don't use fingers unless it's like a really lighter formula, more of a skincare formula or a tinted moisturizer. I tend not to use my fingers because that generally doesn't look as smooth and polished. The texture issues start to come out a lot quicker. And when you break through your oils, the result isn't as pretty. But I know some people, they don't want to spend a lot of money on tools. They always have their hands around. It's just more convenient. I get that, but you might want to consider just a lighter foundation if you want to go that route, just because it's more likely that it's going to look better and last longer throughout the day. All right, so let's get into the downsides of using tools versus fingers and all that. So with brushes, I would say probably once a week. If you're wearing foundation most days of the week, you're going to want to wash these once a week. If you want to be really hygienic every day, but that will kind of break down your brushes much faster if you wash them every day. But if you have acne prone skin and you want to keep everything clean, I totally get that. Just realize if you use a natural hairbrush that things might start to deteriorate a little bit faster. But you want to use like a proper cleanser with your brushes and make sure water doesn't get down the ferrule. You want to make sure that the water stays just where the hair is and that they dry flat. You don't want to have them dry like this so the water runs down. That can also deteriorate your brushes. But I would say once a week is good if you're just using them on yourself, of course. Now, if you're a makeup artist, you know you need to clean them after every client. But also, if you change up your foundations, maybe your foundations have slightly different color, you have residue from your previous makeup application, you might want to rinse in between. But I do recommend getting at least one foundation brush to try it, see what the hype is about. Now, there is different types of brushes, like I mentioned. The flat one might be an option, something more dense might be an option. Some of the brushes are super dense. I think more dense means more coverage. I don't like a super amount of coverage, so I like something with a little bit of flexibility. I think it's important to go to try brushes in person if you can. They're all a little bit different. This Rare Beauty one has like an angle to it. I mean, unfortunately, you don't always know what they're going to be like until you actually apply makeup with them. It's definitely trial and error, but yeah, find something in your price range that you can feel comfortable using. For sponges, now Beauty Blender was like the most popular one, what people are probably aware of in the makeup game. They have like an egg shape similar to this, and I will say Beauty Blender is very soft. It's almost too soft for me personally. I felt like I easily got cracks in it, and that is the thing with sponges, you can damage them pretty easily if you don't know how to wash and take care of them and dry them properly. Cracks, when you get in a sponge, you're more likely to get bacteria resting in those cracks, harder to clean. You do not want cracks in your sponges. So with the Beauty Blender, I found that I got those more easily, but I will say the Beauty Blender is very soft even when dry. But I would say there's so many different brands of sponges out there today. Like, try one in your price range. Remember, you're probably going to have to replace them several times throughout the year. Depends on how often you use them, you wash them. They probably do need to be cleaned multiple times a week if you are wearing makeup most days of the week. Most people would probably say the safest thing to do is wash them every time you use them, just because sponges do hold a lot of bacteria. So think about that. Which one's in your price range? Beauty Blender is like $20, so that's very expensive to replace regularly. And you know, you just have to realize like what is important to you with your makeup, how much you want to spend. Real Techniques, I think, is a more on the affordable side, and it's also available at a lot of places. These are a stiffer sponge though. They're a little bit harder, but the more you use them, the more you dampen them, the softer that they get. I think I like the angle, the flat side. I think the shape is nice. It gives you a nice way to hold them. And then they have the smaller size too. I will say I'm less likely to get cracks with this one. It is a little bit stiffer, but I still really think it works. I still think it works very well, and I prefer a decent option over a really expensive one. It's just easier to replace these. Cleaning, whether it's brushes or sponges, something you have to think about, okay? You want to get a good soap that is going to do the job but not overly damage your brushes. I use the Dr. Bronner's Castile soap. This is the hemp almond one, but if you can find it, I would get the light blue unscented one. They have all different colors and scents, but it's a pretty good bargain for how much product you get, and you can use this for other purposes as well, not just cleaning your makeup brushes. But the Castile soap is an oil-based soap, so it really does get out the makeup really well. And you wet the sponge in the sink, hold out your hand with with sponges in particular, you hold out your hand, put some soap in, okay? You take your sponge, rub it like this into the oil soap, and you'll start to see the makeup come out. Add a little bit of water, that helps get the makeup out. And you want to do this all under the sink, and that is how I clean my sponges. If you were to just pour soap directly on here and just squeeze, it doesn't do a great job of getting the makeup out. You need to add water to it, and you need to add some friction. So I like to move it around in the hand. Otherwise, if you kind of just clean things like you normally think about cleaning things, you might start to get at cracks and overly rough up the sponge. So that's just my tips on cleaning. What I like about sponges is you can obviously see that a sponge is dirty with a brush. Sometimes when something's dirty, like you can't really tell that much how like dirty it is. I mean, you can see a little bit of makeup there, but it just kind of hides the makeup a little bit better. But with a sponge, you can really see, okay, I need to clean this. So that's one good thing about it. It's easy to tell when it's dirty. I definitely prefer a sponge most of the time, but I do like to try brushes once in a while. I did get the Fusion set, hoping to change things up a little bit more. For some foundations, it seems to work just fine with the brushes. Other foundations, using the sponge is just easier for me. I know some people actually combine both. They use both a brush and they finish off with a sponge. And I have found a lot of success with that, especially with the Fusion brushes. With most foundations, I still have some trouble around the nose most of the time. So I will finish with blending in with a sponge, and it makes all the difference in the world. But for some of you, I know that means like, oh, I have to clean 2 different things now if I use 2 different tools. Totally get it, but the finish does look good at the end of the day. All right, guys, that is my thoughts, tips, and tricks, and just wanted to point out differences on different foundation application techniques. Please let me know your favorite tools in the comments below. If you like this video, click the thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.